The prophet who saw his own chains. Here's a question no one asks while they're cheering for a chosen one. What if the prophecy isn't a gift? What if seeing the future isn't power? It's a cage built out of your own certainty. Oedipus was told exactly how his story would end. He ran from it his entire life. He walked directly into it anyway, because the running was the mechanism of the trap. Paul Atreides has spent 2 films earning your love as a messiah. This third and final film exists to punish you for loving him. Frank Herbert wrote Dune Messiah, the novel this film adapts, specifically as a correction. He watched readers worship Paul as a savior after the first book, and wrote the sequel to say explicitly, you weren't supposed to admire him. You were supposed to fear what admiring him does to you. That's the entire Nietzschean warning buried in this franchise. The Übermensch isn't a fantasy to aspire to. It's a diagnosis of what happens when a society becomes so desperate for a savior that it stops asking what the savior actually wants. The trailer shows Paul, 12 years after his holy war, sitting on a throne built from a religion he never wanted to start, and it's still killing people in his name. Now, look at the confrontation the new trailer builds itself around. Chani facing Paul, not in battle armor, but in stillness. Betrayal shown through proximity, not distance. The camera doesn't need a wide shot for this scene. It needs closeness, because the tragedy isn't political anymore. It's personal. The woman who saved his life in part 1 is the same woman watching what saving his life turned him into. That's the existentialist trap closing shut. Sartre argued we're condemned to be free, forced to choose, with no excuse available afterward. Paul had prescience. He saw this outcome coming, chapters in advance, and chose it anyway, which means every one of his justifications about destiny collapses. He wasn't fated. He was free the entire time, and he used that freedom to become exactly what he feared. Here's where the film gets formally interesting, not just thematically. Reports from the shoot describe portions filmed on 16mm, deliberately grainier and rawer than the pristine digital IMAX scale of the first 2 films. That's not a budget choice. That's an argument made through film stock. The first 2 Dune films used clean, godlike cinematography. Arrakis as something too vast and perfect to be touched by human error. This one is choosing to let the image degrade, to let grain and texture back in. Visually, it's the same move as the narrative. Godhood corroding back into something human, fallible, mortal. The Empire looks less immaculate because the Emperor is less immaculate. And then there's Anya Taylor-Joy as Alia, Paul's sister, born already carrying the inherited memory and consciousness of every ancestor in her bloodline. Think about what that actually means philosophically. She isn't a child who will grow into wisdom. She's a child who is already, at birth, a vessel for a collective inherited consciousness she never asked to hold. That's Jung's collective unconscious, stripped of metaphor and made completely literal. Every archetype, every ancestral memory Jung theorized lives dormant in all of us. In Alia, it's not dormant. It's awake, fully formed inside a child's body from the first breath. Horror in this franchise doesn't need a monster. It needs a girl who remembers being every woman who came before her. Now the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. Duncan Idaho is back, played again by Jason Momoa, despite dying in the very first film of the trilogy. Sit with that. This isn't an actor returning for a flashback. In Herbert's universe, this is almost certainly a ghola, a clone regrown from dead cellular tissue, engineered to eventually recover the original's memories. Which means the question the film is quietly asking is the oldest identity puzzle in philosophy, dressed in spice and sandworms: the Ship of Theseus. If you rebuild a man's body and eventually restore his memories, is he the same person who died, or a flawless forgery wearing a dead man's name? Denis Villeneuve has called finishing this trilogy the privilege of his life, a decade of work closing here. And there's something fitting about that. Because the trilogy's real subject was never sandworms or spice. It was the danger of believing any one man's decade-long vision, any one prophet's certainty, should be handed unquestioned authority over everyone else's future. So when this film ends and the empire Paul built either survives him or doesn't, ask yourself the question Herbert wanted asked 40 years before this trailer existed. Were you rooting for a hero, or were you just relieved someone else was making the decisions for you?